Imagine finding out that someone you trusted the most had been planning to betray you for years. When my dad passed away, I thought I'd finally be able to honor the legacy he spent decades building. But I found out my stepmother had other plans, and that some family betrayals are engineered with the precision of an architect. This family inheritance drama will show you how the truth always finds its way. My name is Elijah Rogers. I'm 34 years old. And up until 3 months ago, I thought I had a perfectly normal life here in Fairview, Michigan. I work as a tech consultant. You know, the guy who shows up when your system crashes at the worst possible moment. I spend my days saving small businesses from ransomware attacks, improving bank security systems, solving problems that make other programmers break a sweat. After my mom died when I was 10, tech became my safe space, a world where problems had logical solutions, unlike real life. Back then, I had no idea I was about to uncover a family inheritance drama that would change everything. Diana moved into our house 2 years after my mom died, like someone who stepped out of a home decor magazine. Flawless, with the perfect smile at the perfect time, rearranging absolutely everything. At first, I'll admit it was actually a good thing. Our house had felt like a ghost town after losing my mom. My dad buried himself in work at Rogers Construction just to avoid the silence. But she had this peculiar ability to always be around when he got home, and conveniently missing when I needed anything. Small details a 12-year-old notices but can't quite explain. Early signs of a wrong that would only come to light years later. Time went by and I naturally drifted away. Not in some dramatic way, it just happened. I got a scholarship for software engineering in Detroit, and over time, Fairview became just the place I came back to for the holidays. My dad seemed genuinely happy with my stepmother, and I was building my own life, my own clients, my own routine. When I came home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, it felt like visiting a version 2.0 of my family. Everything working fine, but with completely different software. They had inside jokes, new traditions that started after I left. A dynamic that didn't really include me. Honestly, I felt freer knowing my dad had someone by his side. What I didn't know was that freedom was built on a lie. The call came on a random Tuesday in March, right in the middle of a video call with a client from Grand Rapids. Her voice was strangely formal, like she was reading from a mental script, when she told me my dad had died of a heart attack during the night. "I've taken care of everything," she said. "The funeral will be on Friday, just close family and intimate friends." When I asked if she needed anything or if I could help with the arrangements, she simply said, "Don't worry, Elijah. It's all taken care of." I hung up with that feeling you get when a program freezes. Technically, nothing crashed, but something was definitely not working right. I didn't know it yet, but I was already being quietly removed from my own family's story. I arrived at my dad's funeral on a rainy Thursday, only to find out he had been buried on Wednesday. The neighbors from the street I grew up on looked at me with a mix of pity and awkwardness when I asked where the service was being held. "Elijah, the funeral was yesterday," said Mrs. Hampton, who'd lived next door for 30 years. "We thought you knew." My stepmother had organized a small ceremony for close family. Herself, a few relatives I barely knew, and a handful of co-workers from Rogers Construction. My own father was buried without me there. I walked away feeling like I had lost more than just a dad. I'd lost my place in the family itself, the first sign of a family inheritance drama that was just beginning. 3 days later, I got a call from the secretary at Davidson & Associates, a local law firm. I was asked to attend the reading of the will on Monday at 10 a.m. I figured things were finally going back to normal. Practical stuff, paperwork, the kind of thing I was good at. I showed up right on time and found Diana already seated in the conference room dressed in black, alongside an attorney I'd never seen before. "Elijah," she said with a formal nod. "This is Mr. Davidson. He'll be conducting the reading." I thought it was odd not to see the lawyer my dad had used for 20 years, but figured maybe that was normal in inheritance cases. Sometimes you only notice the wrong details when it's already too late. The will was straightforward and brutal. She inherited the family house, Rogers Construction, the bank accounts, and all personal belongings. All I got was a small sum of money to assist with funeral costs and related expenses. Davidson read the whole thing in a flat tone like he was listing off groceries. She kept a solemn expression, but I caught a flicker of satisfaction when he mentioned the transfer of the company. "Your father wanted to make sure you'd follow your own path," she said, touching my arm with fake compassion. "He always talked about how proud he was of your independence." The absurdity of the moment was almost laughable. This was what a stepmom betrayal looked like in real life. Not some loud, dramatic explosion, but a silent betrayal executed with precision. I left the office in silence, gave my former stepmother a polite nod, and walked to my car. I didn't yell, didn't question, didn't make a scene. I just sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes trying to process what had just happened. My phone rang. It was her, probably wanting to talk about next steps. I didn't answer. I started the car and drove back to my apartment, feeling like I'd just lost a game I never knew I was playing. Later that night, as I mentally replayed every detail of the reading, one simple question started to bother me. Where the hell was the lawyer our dad had trusted for decades? I spent the entire weekend in that mode, mentally replaying every detail of the will reading, but not in an emotional way. It was like debugging a code that kept throwing errors. I knew something was wrong, but I needed to find exactly where. My stepmother had been way too careful, too organized, too in control. My dad was never the kind of man to make major decisions without consulting the family lawyer who'd known us since before I was born. So why, when it came to something as important as his final wishes, would he switch to a total stranger? Sunday night, I looked up Davidson and Associates. Legit firm, but they specialized in corporate law, not family estates. Monday morning, I called the old lawyer's office. The secretary, a woman who'd worked there since I was a kid, answered with the warm familiarity of someone who'd watched me grow up. "Elijah, I'm so sorry for your loss," she said. "Mr. Coleman's been expecting your call." Expecting me? I scheduled a meeting for late afternoon, and the rest of the day crawled by. I couldn't focus on any of my consulting projects. Every time I tried to dive into some code, my mind drifted back to that strange sense of having lost a game I didn't even know I was playing. When you work with systems long enough, you develop a gut instinct for when something doesn't add up, and something here definitely didn't. Mr. Coleman greeted me with a firm handshake, but I could see concern in his eyes. "Elijah, I need to tell you a few things," he said before I even sat down. "Joseph came to see me 3 months before he died. He wanted to update his will. He pulled out a file and laid it in front of me. He was worried about some odd activity in the company accounts. Said she was asking too many questions about Roger's construction." Coleman paused, watching my reaction. "It's all documented, Elijah. Every conversation, every concern. He suspected something was going on." That was the moment I realized the injustice I had experienced ran deeper than I thought. The terms he showed me were completely different from what had been read on Monday. This version, properly signed and notarized, left 60% of the estate to me and 40% to my former stepmother, including the house, to ensure her security. But Roger's construction would be mine entirely. "Joseph said you were the only one who truly understood the value of hard work," the lawyer explained. "He wanted you to continue his legacy, but in a way that was still fair to her." Looking at those documents, I felt a mix of relief and rage. Relief that my dad hadn't forgotten me. Rage at how far the betrayal had gone. This was what a real will looked like. Not flashy, just fair. The man explained that he had sent copies of the original will to Diana and Davidson 3 weeks before my dad's death. They knew exactly what they were doing, he said, with a sternness I'd never seen in him. "This isn't just a family issue, Elijah. This is document fraud." He had prepared all the necessary documentation, including recordings of conversations with Joseph. He always recorded important meetings and the official registry filings. Joseph gave me clear instructions. If anything happened, I was to protect your interests. He had a gut feeling. I left there with a folder full of evidence and a completely different mindset. It wasn't about loss anymore. It was about justice. That night I sat at my kitchen table and organized all the files like it was a complex software project. The original will, the registry records, the conversation recordings, proof that my stepmother and Davidson had seen the real document. Every piece fit perfectly, forming a clear picture of deliberate manipulation. I picked up my phone and sent her a simple message. "We need to talk about the inheritance. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the family lawyer's office. I didn't explain anything, didn't threaten, didn't show any emotion. I just scheduled the meeting. Because when you've got all the right information, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. The next morning, I arrived at the family lawyer's office 15 minutes before the scheduled time. I wanted to make sure everything was ready before my ex-stepmother arrived. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked me, organizing the evidence on the table. "Ready," I replied. But the truth was I didn't really know what to expect. I thought it would be a conversation about the will, maybe some kind of negotiation. She showed up right at 10 a.m., accompanied by Davidson, which already struck me as odd. "Elijah," she said, trying to keep her usual tone. "Thank you for agreeing to talk. I'm sure we can clear up any misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? That word bothered me more than it should have. Davidson immediately took control of the conversation. "Mr. Rogers, I understand there are some concerns about your father's testamentary dispositions," he said, opening a folder. "I'd like to clarify them." The family lawyer politely interrupted him. "Before any clarifications, I'd like to hear how you explain some inconsistencies we found." He placed bank statements on the table. "Transfers made from Mr. Joseph Rogers' personal account to accounts we don't recognize." I saw her face go pale. "Were these transfers made with his knowledge?" he asked directly. Diana exchanged a nervous glance with Davidson. I helped Joseph with the finances. Everything was authorized." "Interesting," Coleman continued, laying more evidence on the table. "Because these transfers total $180,000 over the past 18 months. Always small amounts, always to the same account." He paused, observing both of their reactions. "A joint account held by you and Mr. Davidson here." The silence that followed was deafening. Davidson began stammering something about financial management, but the family lawyer wasn't finished. "What's even more interesting is that these transfers increased significantly after Mr. Joseph was diagnosed with heart problems." I felt my stomach tighten. The injustice I had suffered was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. The man opened another, thicker folder. "We have here records showing that Rogers Construction lost 5 major contracts in the past 8 months, all canceled due to financial instability." He looked directly at my ex-stepmother. "Contracts that, according to our clients, were canceled at your suggestion." Diana finally found her voice. "I was trying to protect the company, to keep Joseph from committing to projects he couldn't follow through on because of his health." "Protect?" he questioned. "Or create a narrative of insolvency to justify the financial moves." Davidson tried to step in, but the lawyer continued relentlessly. "Because, curiously, right after each cancellation, there were transfers from the company account to personal ones. That was the moment I started to realize this wasn't just about an altered will. It was about a scheme, elaborate and years in the making." "How long has this been going on?" I asked for the first time since the meeting started. The family lawyer checked his records. "Based on what we've found, at least 2.5 years. Always small amounts, always with plausible justifications." She tried to explain. "Elijah, you have to understand. I was taking care of everything. The finances were complicated." "Complicated because you were stealing?" I replied with a calm that surprised me. "It wasn't about taking care of my father. It was about preparing for when he died." The look on her face confirmed everything I needed to know. Davidson tried to take control again. "Mr. Coleman, even if there were minor irregularities, that doesn't invalidate the will we presented." "Minor?" the lawyer interrupted. "We're talking about over $400,000 diverted over 2.5 years, including funds from the company and from Mr. Joseph's personal account." He laid more evidence on the table. "There's also proof that you both prepared false documents to justify some of the transfers." My chest tightened. $400,000. My father had been systematically robbed for years and I never noticed. "This isn't a family dispute," he continued. "It's a criminal case of embezzlement and fraud." My ex-stepmother broke down. "Elijah, please, I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted to make sure I'd be taken care of when Joseph passed." "At his expense?" I asked. "At the expense of the company he spent his life building?" She couldn't answer. Davidson was visibly nervous, sweating and flipping frantically through his notes. "How many other people are involved in this?" I asked the lawyer. "We're still investigating," he replied. "But there are signs that there may be more." More? The conspiracy was even bigger than I had imagined. This had stopped being a personal matter and had become something systemic. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours, but the final 30 minutes were the most revealing. Every piece of evidence the lawyer presented revealed another layer of the fraud. Fake contracts, unauthorized transfers, even forged invoices used to justify withdrawals. "Your father started to suspect in the final months," he explained to me. "That's why he came to me, why he updated the will, why he documented everything." She tried several times to explain herself, but each excuse sounded more desperate than the last. Davidson, in turn, tried to minimize his involvement, but the evidence clearly showed he had helped build the financial scheme. It was a full-blown conspiracy, not a crime of opportunity. When the meeting ended, I felt like I had uncovered only a part of the truth. The injustice I had suffered with the will was just the final act of a much bigger drama. For years, while I was building my independent life, my father had been systematically robbed by those he trusted the most. "What do we do now?" I asked the lawyer once she and Davidson had left. "Now," he replied. "You need to decide whether you just want to recover your inheritance or if you want full justice." I left that office knowing the decision ahead wasn't just about money. It was about the kind of man I wanted to be and the kind of legacy I wanted to leave in honor of my father. I left the lawyer's office that afternoon knowing exactly what I needed to do. I wasn't just going to hold on to the evidence. I was going to use the real will to take back control of everything my father had built. I spent the night organizing my strategy. First, officially claim my position as the rightful heir. Next, regain control of Rogers Construction. And finally, prepare all the documentation for the final confrontation. The next morning by 8 a.m. And I was already at the property registry office. "I need to update the ownership of these assets," I said, placing the authentic will on the table. There was an error in the previous paperwork. The clerk reviewed everything carefully. "Documentation looks perfect. It'll be finalized today." From the property office, I went straight to the bank where my father kept the company's accounts. I didn't want to make a scene, just ensure I had full access to the financial records. "I'm now the person in charge of Rogers Construction," I told the manager, showing him the real will. "I need to reverse some unauthorized permissions." He reviewed the documents, checked the records, and compared signatures. "Everything seems to be in order, Mr. Rogers. I'll update the records right away." 20 minutes later, I had full power of attorney over all company accounts. My ex-stepmother had lost all official access to the funds, but she didn't know it yet. While I was still at the bank, I called 3 longtime employees from Rogers Construction, people I'd known since I was a kid. "I need an urgent meeting," I told each of them, "about the future of the company." I didn't explain the details. I just scheduled meetings for the afternoon. Rogers Construction was about to be restructured, and the people loyal to my father deserved to know there was new leadership. Martha, the secretary, greeted me with surprise. "Elijah, I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm taking back control," I explained simply. "Starting tomorrow, she'll have no authority over anything related to the company." She nodded with clear relief. We knew something was wrong. She had been making strange changes. From the company, I went to the offices of 3 different attorneys. I didn't want to rely solely on the family lawyer for what was coming. "I need representation for inheritance issues and possible fraud," I told each of them. "Full documentation is here." I didn't hire any of them yet. I just wanted to have options lined up. I also visited a forensic accountant that had been recommended by the family lawyer. "I need a full audit of Rogers Construction," I explained. "I suspect systematic embezzlement." He reviewed a few records I had brought. "I can start tomorrow," he said. "Based on what I'm seeing, this is going to be an interesting case." At 4 p.m., I stopped by the communications agency that handled Rogers Construction's advertising. "I need to prepare a press release," I told the director. "There's a change in the company's leadership." He seemed curious, but didn't ask questions. "When do you want to publish it?" "This week," I replied. "I'll let you know when." This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about restoring the credibility of the company my father had built. The Fairview community needed to know that Rogers Construction was under new management, with new standards of transparency. While I was organizing all these preparations, my phone rang. It was Diana. "Elijah, I need to talk to you urgently," she said, with a tension in her voice I had never heard before. "Something strange is going on with the company accounts." "Yes, there is," I replied calmly. "We can talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" she insisted. "But I need—" "Tomorrow, Diana," I repeated and hung up. She was starting to realize she had lost control, but she still didn't know how much. The injustice was being corrected systematically, one document at a time, one signature at a time. All perfectly legal, all perfectly documented. I ended the day at the Rogers construction office, reviewing contracts and projects that had been canceled or suspended in recent months. My father had built a solid company. My ex-stepmother had tried to destroy its reputation, but she couldn't touch the heart of the business. "We're going to reactivate these projects," I told Martha, "and we're going to rehire the employees who were let go without cause." She smiled for the first time in months. "Your father would be proud." This wasn't about revenge against her. It was about honoring the legacy my father had left behind. Rogers Construction was going to be what it always was, a company of integrity, transparency, and commitment to the community. That night I laid out all the evidence on my kitchen table: banking authorizations, updated records, audit contracts, public communication plans. Every piece was in the right place. Every move had been calculated. The family lawyer had given me the proof, but I had turned it into action. She didn't know it yet, but her world had changed completely in a single day. Tomorrow, when we met, she would find out she no longer had control over anything. The real will was official, the assets were being transferred, and the truth about her betrayal was ready to be revealed. I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard. I just let the facts speak for themselves. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:30 a.m. It was my ex-stepmother, and for the first time since it all began, her voice sounded desperate. "Elijah, what did you do? I can't access any of the company accounts. The bank says you're in charge now." "I'm exercising my rights as the rightful heir," I replied calmly, "using the real will my father left." There was a tense silence. "What real will?" "Elijah, you're confused. We already settled this." "No, Diana. You presented an earlier document knowing there was a later one." My tone was firm but controlled. "I need you to come to the lawyer's office today at 10 a.m. We have a lot to discuss." I arrived at the office 15 minutes early. My lawyer had already prepared everything: the real will, proof of delivery, evidence of the fraudulent transfers, all organized as irrefutable proof. She arrived with Davidson, both visibly nervous. "Elijah, I hope we can resolve this misunderstanding." She tried to keep a conciliatory tone. "There is no misunderstanding," he replied before I could speak. "There's document fraud." He placed the authentic will on the table. "This is the real will of Joseph Rogers, dated after the one you presented. You were both aware of its existence." The silence that followed was crushing. "You received copies of this evidence 3 weeks before Mr. Rogers's death," he continued, sliding the delivery confirmations across the table. "Both of you signed for it. You conducted a fraudulent reading knowing there was a newer will." She went completely pale. "That's impossible. We never—" "Your signature is right here," I said, pointing at the receipt. "Date and time confirmed." Davidson tried to argue something about legal procedures, but the lawyer cut him off. "Mr. Davidson, falsifying or concealing a will is a federal crime. You were both fully aware of the true documentation and deliberately hid it. The injustice was being exposed in real time, and there was no way out." My ex-stepmother broke down. "Elijah, you have to understand, I took care of your father. I deserve to be secure." "You would have been secure," I replied. 40% of everything, including the house. But that wasn't enough, was it? She started crying. "The company was struggling. I didn't know how I was going to make it." "So you decided to steal," I said, with a calm that surprised me. $400,000 over 2 years. Systematically. My lawyer laid the bank records on the table. Unauthorized transfers, deliberately canceled contracts, financial sabotage. The woman could no longer keep it together. "I never meant for it to go this far." "It happened because you chose it," I answered. "You chose to steal from my father, You chose to forge his will. You chose to try to deceive me. She made one last plea. Elijah, we're family. I can return everything. We can settle this between us. We're not family, I said firmly. Family doesn't do this. The lawyer organized the evidence. You have 48 hours to voluntarily transfer all assets to the rightful heirs. Otherwise, this goes to the proper authorities. Davidson tried to negotiate, but I cut him off. There is no negotiation. You chose the path of betrayal. Now live with the consequences. As they got up to leave, she turned to me one last time. Elijah, your father wouldn't have approved of this. He was a man of forgiveness. My father documented everything because he knew exactly who you were, I replied. He wasn't naive. He was cautious. She tried to respond, but I raised my hand. We have nothing more to discuss. Any communication will be through lawyers. The break was final. 20 years of coexistence ended in a single sentence. She left the office crying, but some tears come too late. Some betrayals are unforgivable. In the following days, my ex-stepmother tried to contact me several times. Calls, messages even showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer, didn't reply, didn't open the door. The lawyer had warned me. She'll try to play the emotional card, use your father's memory, promise anything. He was right. The messages shifted from pleas to emotional blackmail. Your father wouldn't have approved of this coldness, said one. You're destroying the family he built, said another. I deleted them all without fully reading. Dignity is rebuilt in silence, and I had chosen silence. A week later, I received one final call. It was her, voice defeated. Elijah, my lawyer says we have no way to contest the will. I'll return everything. Perfect, I replied. The lawyer will handle the details. Elijah, Goodbye, Diana, I said, and hung up. I blocked the number. That was it. There was no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no second chance. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. The family inheritance drama was over, but I didn't feel victorious. Just a strange stillness. Justice had been served, but the real work was just beginning. Now I had to honor the legacy my father left behind. 6 months later, Rogers Construction had become something different from what my father had originally envisioned, but without losing the core he had built. We implemented sustainable technologies in all projects, launched a low-income housing program that had already benefited 15 families, and established partnerships with trade schools to train new professionals. Martha, now my executive assistant, always smiled when she looked at the monthly reports. Your father would be proud, she'd say. You took his vision and brought it into the 21st century. The company hadn't just survived the crisis, it had thrived. The employees she had fired were brought back with better salaries and benefits my father had never offered. That's what a true legacy looked like, not just preserving, but evolving. The house I grew up in went through a complete renovation. I turned my father's office into a quiet memorial, his old tools, photos from the early construction projects, and a desk where I placed the real will in a frame. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the truth always finds its way. The rest of the house breathed new life. Light walls, modern furniture, but still keeping the elements that made it a home. I sold my apartment and moved permanently to Fairview. It wasn't nostalgia that brought me back, it was responsibility. The town that had seen my father build his reputation deserved to see that reputation honored the right way. I never heard from her directly again. From the occasional comments around town, she had moved to another region, far from Fairview. Some people still asked about her, but I'd always politely changed the subject. There was no bitterness, just a quiet indifference. The lawyer told me she had settled all debts and returned the full amount of the stolen funds. She upheld the agreement, he said. Legally, everything is closed. Closed for the courts, closed for everyone involved. Some people leave our lives and only leave behind lessons. Hers was clear. Trust is good, but documentation is better. That Friday night, I sat on the porch of the house I grew up in, reviewing the week's projects. Rogers Construction had 6 new contracts, all focused on sustainability and social responsibility. My phone rang. It was the lawyer, calling for a monthly check-in that had become a tradition. How are things? He asked. Peaceful, I answered. watching the sunset over Fairview. For the first time in months, truly peaceful. The family inheritance drama had ended, but the real story was just beginning. Because some victories aren't about what you win, but about what you build after the win. My father had left me far more than money or property. He had left me the chance to become the man he always knew I could be. And now I turn to you. Yes, you, the one who stayed with me through this journey. Have you ever gone through something similar in your family? Have you been excluded from important decisions by relatives or lived through betrayal over money? Share your experience in the comments. I want to know how you dealt with injustice in the family, and if you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to love you. If this story touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Every day I bring real stories of people who turned family abandonment into opportunities to rebuild, through truth and genuine respect. Just like I learned that sometimes the most powerful form of justice is simply living with dignity after betrayal. You can also discover that your true legacy isn't in what others do to you, but in what you choose to build for yourself after the storm.